thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I really appreciate that. I appreciate people's time because I know time is
Absolutely.
priceless. And I
Mhm.
was looking over your website and you're busy. Like you do a lot of work.
I am busy, but it's a good busy. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and just a little bit of your background and where you're from and you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, I am a wife and a mom of three kids, not all really kids anymore. I've got an adult daughter who's 21 and a daughter who's 18 and a son who's 16. So they definitely keep me busy. But I also run a nonprofit called the Set Me Free Project, and we do prevention education on human trafficking, social media safety, and healthy relationships. And we have a great curriculum for the schools from K through college for youth and then adults of every facet of the community. And I have a podcast called Resilience in Life and Leadership because everything we do has resilience attached to it. And I speak on a plethora of subjects to whomever will listen. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I love that. And like, you know, I work in the mental health field
Mhm.
and this is a topic that like I'm not very knowledgeable about. Like,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
I recognize that it's super important.
right, right.
Like, so what kind of got you into this type of work?
So I was working in the area of women's. I was speaking all over, and I was working specifically with women in the area of sexual and domestic violence. I myself am a survivor of sexual and domestic violence and addiction. Also, a recovering alcoholic. So I have all the things attached to me, and really, I wanted to use that to really help women live a life of victory and success. And um, one of my coworkers said one day, "Hey, let's help sex trafficked victims," having no idea what that meant. That was in my mind, women who were overseas and kidnapped and sold into the sex trade. And when I really researched what it was, because I had also worked with youth in schools, speaking to middle and high schoolers on healthy relationships. And when I really realized that it had nothing to do with kidnapping, that rarely happens with trafficked individuals, but more of relationship building, and the targets of traffickers were our youth. And so as I learned a lot about what it really looked like, and it was in our own backyard, and as a mom of three, I thought, yeah, we've really got to do something to change the narrative of what this is in people's minds. And so that's how we began. We began about 7 years ago. And at first, we built a curriculum for middle and high schoolers and parents. And it's just grown since there. Educators really see the need for what we're doing, um, and they see it in their schools. Their kiddos are being targeted and taken advantage of on a daily basis, and it's usually done through social media, so it's
Mhm.
very easily accessible.
Yes, definitely. Because you're right. Like, I feel like when I first thought about human trafficking, I did picture, the kidnapping.
Yeah, it's the movie
Yeah.
Taken, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the being kidnapped and stuff like that and taken
Mhm.
advantage of. Um, but it is very more common than people think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I actually just finished watching, I don't know if you've watched it, but you reminded me, I actually just finished watching the Jeffrey Epstein
Mhm,
documentary on
mhm,
Netflix.
mhm,
And then I was also watching this other show, Web of Lies, where it talked about sextortion with
mhm.
teenagers
Yes,
online and stuff
yes.
like that. So I was like,
Huge.
yeah, I was like, wow, like, like I didn't realize like how often this happens. And
Yeah.
how it could happen. And
Yeah.
so
Well, and Jeffrey Epstein is actually a perfect example because
mhm,
although he was probably living a different world than most of us
mhm.
financially. He used the individuals he trafficked to recruit other individuals, and so they went to their schools. They went, and that is absolutely how it happens.
Yeah, where it becomes kinda like a pyramid and
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So I guess like for someone who's listening and they really have no idea of what this kind of is,
Yeah.
um, what do you feel like is a common myth on of human trafficking?
You bet. Well, first, let me define it
Yes,
because
please.
that is human trafficking is the buying and selling of a human being for the personal profit or gain of another through force, fraud, or coercion. And so that force piece is what we often think about, but it's really through fraud and coercion that we see most of it happening. And so, probably one of the biggest myths out there is that it does involve kidnapping. And the reality is that the majority of individuals who are trafficked are, first of all, they don't recognize that they're being trafficked because this is someone I love, this is someone I care about. But second of all, they know their trafficker before they are ever trafficked.
Mm,
It is very rare that somebody who is trafficked is just taken
yeah.
and trafficked. And so they usually know the individual and they build a relationship with them. I would say one of the second biggest myths is that only girls are victims of
Mhm.
trafficking and only guys are the big bad traffickers. And we know that boys, men, girls, and women are all, there's all an ability to be trafficked. And um, also, there's a huge risk for the LGBTQ population. And so everyone is at risk, but boys can be trafficked almost equally as girls. It just depends on what community you're in. But boys tend to not be talked about because there is a lack of disclosure with boys.
Mhm.
They're often not telling anybody because of the stigma and the shame of saying, I mean, even when you look at domestic violence, a man who is abused by his wife or girlfriend partner is less likely to disclose that than a woman is. So
Mm.
those are probably the two biggest myths, that it's about kidnapping and that only girls are victims of trafficking.
Yeah, because even like I told you, the 2 documentaries I watched,
Yeah.
all of the stories were girls.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and we do hear more about girls because they are more likely to disclose. And so that is probably the biggest reason. I would say another one of the biggest myths of trafficking is that it's only men who are traffickers. 52% of trafficking recruiters are
Mhm.
males, but 42% of trafficking recruiters are females. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
a huge number. And 6% recruit as couples. And so when we're looking at some of those things, when my kids were little, I used to always say, go find the nearest mom if you're ever in trouble.
Mhm.
But we know that moms are absolutely capable of trafficking their kiddos or somebody else. In fact,
Mm.
there was a mom in our community that owned a spa, quote unquote, and she wound up trafficking her daughter's friend. She recruited her, trafficked her, and ruined her life. And this was my friend's mom. And so it can be
Oh.
absolutely insidious, but we also see a tremendous amount of familial trafficking happening where moms and dads are the traffickers of their own children. Grandmas and grandpas are the traffickers. So it is a big, big evil thing.
Wow. It's scary. It's scary to
It's,
think
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
where are you safe? Where are we safe?
yeah.
Like
Well, and that's why our organization does what we do because it is very scary. But what we want to do, our mission is to stop human trafficking before it starts, because we want to give parents and educators and kids the ability and the tools to actually prevent it from happening. And then it's about empowering. It's
Mhm.
about, hey, this is how you do that. And we are, as scary as it is, our goal is to really not bring fear tactics
Yeah.
to teaching this, because those don't work a whole lot. And so we want to really empower our kids. We want to empower our youth. This is what it looks like. This
Mm.
is what it doesn't. And this is how to have a healthy relationship. This is what a not a healthy relationship looks like. And these are the tactics that traffickers are using to find individuals to traffic. And so that's
Wow.
kind of how we work.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you that next is there certain things that you feel that traffickers look for in victims, or how do they go about selecting the victims, or,
Yeah,
whatever?
yeah. Well, traffickers absolutely look for vulnerabilities. And so that is something that we have to be really mindful of. Now, here's the trick. We all have vulnerabilities, every single one of us. And vulnerabilities are not necessarily weaknesses. Vulnerabilities could be just, hey, I'm this age and I'm vulnerable because so for example, we all have a prefrontal cortex in our brain that makes our decisions, and that is usually fully developed when we're 25. So 25 to 30 now, and it's getting higher because of social media. So if I'm 21, which I'm not, but if I was 21, then I would have that vulnerability of age. That's not a weakness, that's
Mhm.
just a reality. And so there are other vulnerabilities, though, like poverty and homelessness, mental illness, physical disabilities. But you could have a vulnerability where you just post something like, I am so mad at my mom today, and boom, that's a vulnerability because you've shared it with whomever. And now somebody steps in and says, gosh, I got in a fight with my mom too.
Yeah.
I get it. And starts to build that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just mind blowing, just
Yeah.
the little tactics and stuff that can be
Yeah.
used.
It's easy to do today because we
Mhm.
post everything, and it's just really easy to access all that information.
Yeah. Um, how how does human trafficking look like once um the trafficker maybe has recruited a victim, or picked them, whatever? Like, how does that start and then spiral, or like how does it look like?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a story. For example,
Mhm.
there was a young girl. She was in eighth grade. She was posting on Instagram, and that was her favorite thing to do. She loved going out, and she would post, "Hey guys, we're going here. Let's go. Let's have fun." And she happened to be followed by a trafficker. Now she didn't know that, and he ran into her, not coincidentally, but ran
Yeah.
into her at a coffee shop and started to talk to her and said, "Hey, I know you." And she
Mhm.
said, "I don't think so." And he said, "Yeah, you go to this place that we all go to." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah. In fact, I just saw you wearing this, right?" And she said, "Yeah, you looked awesome. Thank you." And so now we've started the relationship building. So
Mhm.
it's really the grooming process. They target you, and
Mhm.
then they start to gain your trust. What you love, I love. You love going to California beaches. So do I. You love cute little pug dogs. Me too. And I'm going to gain your trust. Then I'm going to fill a need. And that can be an emotional need, that can be a physical need. But when I fill a need with you, like, oh my gosh, you're beautiful, and I'm feeling that need of that value that you need to feel, that importance and that love and respect, whatever that may be,
Mhm.
or I need a place to stay. Hey, you can stay with me. So when I fill a need of yours that seemingly no one else in your life is filling, we build a pretty strong bond. And that is a really big thing right there. And so that's something that absolutely can start to really develop that relationship. And then now I start to isolate you. And that could look like, hey, your friends aren't around anymore because they don't love you like I do. Your parents are super controlling. I would never treat you like that. Then I'm going to sexualize you as a product. And that goes back to that sextortion that we talked about
Mhm.
and things like that. And then I maintain control. And with this young girl, they dated for a year or so. And then he went into her school. He was much older. And he said, hey, I'm here to pick up, Jessica. She has a dentist appointment. I'm her dad. He took her out of school, sold her over and over again.
Wow.
And that continued, and he maintained control. So it really looks early on like somebody who is building a relationship, whether a romantic partner, a friend, whatever that may look like. And then I'm going to do everything in my power to make you feel secure, make you feel like I'm the only one in your life or that you can trust. And then boom, I have control.
Wow. You said that was a family member that picked her up from school or
No, it was her trafficker, but
oh,
he
okay.
said he was a family
Wow,
member.
and they just
Yeah.
let her go. That's
Not all
crazy.
schools have the
Yeah,
best
yeah, of course.
security. And depending on the size of your town or city, it's going to
Yeah,
look different. But yeah,
yeah.
that happened
Wow.
um, in Omaha, Nebraska, actually. So,
Yeah, wow. Of these cases, thinking, how often or in your experience, how often has it been family as compared to like a
mm.
stranger?
So we are seeing a huge increase in familial trafficking. There is a restoration house that I work with that has, I think they have five individuals that are women and have all come from all over the country. Every single one of them was trafficked by a family member. And so I don't know the exact statistics because, and unfortunately, with trafficking, statistics are hard to come by because 1% to 2% of trafficked individuals are recovered. That's a really low number, which is why we at the Set Me Free Project want to stop it before it starts, because 1% to 2% are recovered. So because of that, though, it's through those recovered individuals that you get statistics. It's through people who
Yeah,
disclose and report. And so statistics are tough, but I know that familial trafficking is definitely on the increase. And it seems to be a very, very common thing.
yeah. Wow. Um, what does trafficking, human trafficking always involve sex? Or
Oh,
is
great
that just,
question.
yeah,
Great question. No, human trafficking does not always involve sex.
okay.
There is labor trafficking,
Mhm,
there's child brides, child soldiers, there's things like organ harvesting.
mhm.
And so there are a lot of different kinds of human trafficking. What we see most often domestically is sex trafficking or labor trafficking. Those are usually the top two that we see. And depending on where you are in the country, labor trafficking could be number one, or sex trafficking could be number one. Now, sex trafficking is always involving sex of some sort.
Mhm.
And with sex trafficking, with minors, that force, fraud, or coercion piece does not have to be proven for a conviction
Mhm.
because any commercial sex as a minor is illegal.
Yeah.
But once we get to adults, we have to prove in court that force, fraud, or coercion piece to convict the trafficker.
Wow. Interesting. Um, is there any data or on how if it's mostly minors, adults, or is there any data on that?
Yeah, there is absolutely. So, Statistically, we see a very high range of young adults being trafficked. And so, you know, late teens to, and again, this depends on the area. But a lot of young adults, teens is one of the highest percentages, though, of individuals who are being trafficked. Now, that's primarily for sex.
Mhm.
With labor trafficking, we see a lot of families that might be trafficked. And so that age range is going to look very different than sex trafficking. But for now, the average age of entry for a girl to be trafficked, so average is anywhere between 12 and 19. And
Okay.
that can range from, that those again are sticky statistics because it does take those who disclose and then disclose their age. So that's not, you may disclose but not disclose your age. And so but they believe it's anywhere between 12 and 19. For boys it's even younger. It starts at about 10 to 11 as the average age.
Wow, that's very young.
Yeah, it's awful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, a question that I found that someone asked was,
Mhm.
can a person that's being trafficked, is there such thing as them consenting to it or
Oh,
consenting to doing the stuff, whatever they're
great question. That is a great question. So, because trafficking involves force, fraud, or coercion, you cannot ever consent to
Mhm.
being trafficked. That now, here's the catch, because of the fraud and coercion piece, which is the majority of, so that could be fake relationship, that could be blackmail, manipulation, whatever that may be. Because of those two pieces, most people being trafficked, if asked, would tell you, no, I'm choosing this. I'm not being trafficked because of that fraud and coercion piece. They've been manipulated. They've been told, I love you. This is a
Mhm.
relationship. No, you're doing this for me or us as a family, whatever that case may be. So, when I said most people don't self identify as being trafficked, that just means they don't even recognize they're being trafficked. And so, if you were to ask them, are you doing this by your own choice and are you consenting to it? They would say, yes, I am.
Mhm.
Not true. They're not, but that's what they would say. Now, when we look at prostitution, which is, or sex work, which is what we refer to it as now. But what we refer to it today
Mhm.
is sex work. So when we look at that, the legal definition is that these individuals have chosen this. They are actually consenting to sex work and they are saying, yes, I want to do this. I make my own appointments. I'm my own whatever.
Yeah.
The the catch to that is that I think that the majority of people, none of us grow up thinking, gosh, I really would love to be a sex worker. Being a prostitute is my dream. That just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. And so what kind of trauma was involved that makes that helps that decision be made? And the statistics say only about 3% of individuals are true sex workers, that they're choosing to do this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I would just in general with your answer is like, maybe someone doesn't know they're being trafficked. They don't
Mhm.
have the awareness to, yeah, like you said,
Correct.
recognize it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
what would be some things that we can look for to kind of know that we're being trafficked, or like things to consider, or,
Yeah,
if things come up, what types of things?
absolutely. Well, a couple things. There are absolutely red flags. If you're, let's take somebody first. They might be changing. We always say what their typical is So we don't ever have really
Yeah.
normals, but whatever their typical is, now it's not typical anymore. They're a completely different, they seem to be doing very different things. What their typical is no longer their typical. And that is a red flag. Something is different. It could be that their clothes are changing, their attitude is changing, whatever that may be. They're in a relationship that seems extremely controlling, that they no longer can communicate in the same way that they were. Now, a lot of that can look like a domestic violence situation.
Mhm.
And so when we are looking at trafficking, it's a fine line. It is very different, and the layers of trauma are very different, but it can look like a very fine line between a very abusive relationship and trafficking. So that might be someone that you know. With yourself, or as you're trying to identify this relationship that you're in, there's several things we ask. And it really kind of goes along the idea of who is a trustworthy person? What are those people? And what are the characteristics of a trustworthy person? And this is going to be somebody, we always say four things. A trustworthy person will never ask you to do something illegal.
Oh.
A trustworthy person will never ask you to go against your moral compass. And so if somebody does and says, hey, let's go, whatever, and you're uncomfortable with that, and you say, gosh, no, I don't feel good about that, they're not going to pressure you to do that. A trustworthy person will never ask you to keep a secret from parents or guardians if you're a kiddo. And a trustworthy person always wants the best for you. So if any of these things are off in a relationship, and this can be over time, they can seem trustworthy for an entire year, but as soon as one of those things happens that you say, no, not comfortable, and they say, come on, you need to do this, that's a huge, huge
Yeah.
red flag right there. The other thing we teach people is the importance of true consent. We can consent to certain things, right? And so as long as there's not force, fraud, or coercion there, absolutely we get to say yes or we get to say no. And that needs to start being taught at a very young age, including hugs. Like
Mhm.
if I go in for a big bear hug and you're not a hugger, you get to say, no, thank you. I'm not a hugger.
Mhm.
And that has to be okay. And we've got to teach people that all throughout. It doesn't have to be sexual consent. It can absolutely be, hey, I want to touch your shoulder, but I need to ask you if you're comfortable with that. And then teaching you to say, no, I am not comfortable with that. And so I think those are really, um, really important things. I was talking to someone who was a she is an amazing person that I work with, but she is also a survivor of a lot of trauma and abuse and things like that. And one of the things I ask people is, are you a hugger? And she said, I like the way you say that because sometimes what people will say is, can I give you a hug?
Mhm.
Now, if you are somebody who has not had a whole lot of choice in your life and you don't get to choose, you've had abusive situations, you've grown up with abusive situations, and you don't get to choose those things, you probably won't be very likely to say, no, you may not give me a hug. But if I ask you, are you a hugger? That's a real
Mhm.
question that you would be much more comfortable asking. So that consent piece is just so important to teach and to look for. So if there is anybody in your life that is pressuring you to do things that you don't feel comfortable with and they don't respond to it, no, thank you. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, and, like, just even making threats of any kind,
Yeah, oh gosh,
for
yeah,
sure,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Any abuse, whether physical, emotional, anything like that is I say that's a game changer and you want to walk away from those things.
Yeah. how can we protect ourselves from trafficking and then also like our children, our kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially now with social media? I feel like you said, like it's I don't want to say easier, but there's more access.
It's absolutely easier. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how can we
Yeah.
protect ourselves or monitor like
You
these
bet.
kinds of things?
Well, we need to, number one, as adults, be very aware of how to safely navigate social media and then teach our kids how to safely navigate it. So, one of the things that we really need to be mindful of is we don't want a bunch of people following us that we don't know. Now, knowing somebody too is a real important piece because um, I might, we've met today
Mhm.
and but you and I don't truly know each other, right? And
Mhm.
so what does that mean to say, okay, yeah, you can follow me on social media, we're friends. That's kind of the mindset today of that social media thing. We can meet on social media, we can become friends on social media, and then we're in a relationship on social media, whatever that looks like. Not really the best way to safely navigate social media. And so we want to be mindful of those things. And we want to teach our kiddos that very thing. Who's following you? Do you know that person? What does it mean to know somebody? What does that look like? But then also, as parents, we want to really monitor those things. And so, if we've got kiddos at home that have media of any kind, we want to check it. We want to go through their history. We want to go through their texts. It sounds very invasive, but what I always say is, as a parent, my job is not to make you feel comfortable or happy. My job is to get you to be a grown, wonderful, incredible, and alive adult. And that's my job. And so there are times that with our kiddos, we do need to be pretty invasive, but that is just our obligation as parents.
Yeah, I feel especially like nowadays, I think a lot of young adults or teenagers,
Mhm.
whatever, they put a lot of emphasis on like the number of followers that you
Yep,
have. Like I want to have, so
yep.
many followers. And yeah, like that's just a lot of people that they don't really know.
Right, right, exactly. Well, you think about it, there is a legit job, sort of. I mean, not many people can do this, but to be an influencer. To be an influencer is literally getting as many people following you on social media, creating content, and being, influencing people in whatever it is that you're trying to influence them. And that's not in and of itself a bad thing, but then we need to be mindful of what are we posting? If we're posting pictures of our kids as all these people are following us, well, that might be an indication that that's not the safest thing. Being mindful of some of the identifiers that we have. So if I'm on social media and so you can see on my that I have, and I'm pretty open about this, but that I have an Omaha Chamber of Commerce sign, if you looked closely enough, on my shelf. So that identifies me as somebody who lives in Omaha.
Mhm.
And so those are some of the things that we really want to be thoughtful of when we're talking to our kiddos about social media and you're posting a picture of your friends, ask them if it's okay, but also maybe don't wear your school shirt when you're posting a picture because that identifies you. Now, if the only people following you are people that you would tell that to anyway, awesome. But if you have people, and this is what we do not recommend, have people following you don't know, you really have to be very mindful of what you're posting.
Yeah. And don't share your location
Don't
because
share your location. Don't tell people where you're going. No one really cares
yeah.
except for the people who want to do you harm. And so that is just something to think about.
Yeah, because now you could also like tag your location and things like
Yeah.
that. And Yeah, that's very scary.
Yeah, it's been made very simple. So yeah, you really do want to watch what you're doing on social media. Some of the most things that we don't even think about are things that could be used against us.
And then something that I also did recently that I thought was helpful was like cleaning up my social media. And
Yes,
so
huge.
I did go through like my followers and kind of like, who is this person? Like just, yeah, like, cause
Yep.
you could get kind of get like a little vibe or idea, like by visiting someone's profile. And so I did remove like a lot of followers too. So
Yeah. Yep. Make sure
yeah,
they know you. That's huge. Yeah.
yeah. So, I wanted to know more about your work that you're doing um, with trafficking. Like, what type of work? Like, tell
So
me more.
everything I do is on a prevention basis. I'm all about prevention. So I love to speak on prevention. I love to speak on, we do, so what we do is we package our curriculum and we sell it to sell. It's not like we're making money. We're not making bank on this,
Mhm.
but we want to provide it to schools, get it in the hands of counselors so they can teach those students what this is all about. We want to get it into the hands of agencies so they can do this in their communities. And so that's what we are all about, getting our curriculum in the hands of people who can utilize this. And then personally, and some of our team, we love to speak on this topic. So we are available to speak. We're available to do webinars, especially for adults who want to learn more about the topic and want to be educated. A webinar or a Zoom meeting or whatever is a great way to do that and to learn, because with human trafficking, there are some really amazing organizations out there. What we found was the majority of those organizations are on the restoration
Mhm.
side of things. And that's good. We need that. But there were just not enough doing that prevention education. And the reality is, with 1% to 2% of trafficking individuals recovered, if we could actually stop it before it starts, that would be massive. And so that's really my mission. Um, is to really get people to understand what human trafficking is, what it's not, and really get people to understand what prevention is all about and what they can do to help educate their communities, get that information out there, and really make a difference.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, like the prevention part of it, because I'm thinking of myself as a
Mhm.
teenager, and you know, the, social media wasn't really that popular. And
Mhm.
so I'm thinking about it now. If I was a teenager now,
It's
it
all
would
you
be
knew,
so
right?
different. Yeah.
It is. It's all they know. They've not grown up with a life without social media. And so the idea behind social media is so much different for them than it is for someone like me who didn't grow up with it at all. And so I think that, yeah, that prevention piece and knowing what to look for. One of the things that we do in our curriculum, first of all, we never say do this, don't do that. That's nobody's going to listen to that. Don't be on screens. That's ridiculous. They're not going away. So we need to learn how to safely navigate it. I use social media all the time. And so it's not a bad thing in and of itself. How do you navigate it safely? And in our curriculum, we bring a lot of engagement and a lot of humor, which is weird, I know, to people. When I speak, it's all about bringing them into a journey. And that humor is a huge part of it because we retain information so much better when we hear it with humor. Now, we always say we take our topic very seriously. We don't take ourselves very seriously. And so we're never laughing about the topic. It's other things we have conversations about surrounding that piece. And so that just helps us swallow that in palatable chunks because it's a big, tough, hairy topic and it's hard to hear. And so when we educate, when we train, when we present, when we speak, we do it in ways that really get that information in,
Mhm.
retained, and that you don't leave. I had somebody recently who came to, so I was speaking about this, and they were like, okay, I was really dreading this, and I actually had fun. I was not expecting to have fun. And that's really our goal in empowering whomever it is that we're empowering.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it doesn't have to be like a scary, right, situation
Yeah, right.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So I love the work that you're doing, like I
Thank
said, just
you.
educating families, educating, teenagers,
Yeah.
because I feel like you said, if someone was being trafficked and they don't know the warning
Yeah.
signs, like they just won't know what's
Yeah.
going
No.
on.
If you don't know, you don't
Yeah.
know. Right. Exactly.
And even like families, if they're not really too knowledgeable or aware, they might not even point it out, to
Right.
their kids or whomever. So I think, yeah, like knowledge and education is very important because even with
Mhm.
with anything, like if you don't know the signs, if you don't know about it, like how are you gonna recognize it?
Prevention is huge for everything that
Mhm.
you could possibly talk about. And unfortunately, we're a very reactive society.
Yeah,
We need to become a proactive society. And so that's really what it's all about.
yeah, for sure. What has been the response to when you do this type of work with like teenagers? What has been their response usually?
We have a blast. Oh my
Curious.
gosh. Kids are usually the response is, when are you coming back?
Okay.
We want to hear. And so again, because what we do is fun, it's engaging, it's, humor. Our goal is to have fun with those kids, to get them to think. It's all about critical thinking. And let's think about some things that we can talk about, because we can tell you no all day long and you're going to do the opposite, right?
Mhm.
So the response is great. Kids have fun. Um, we have a curriculum from third grade through college age for youth, but we're expanding that from kindergarten on. And obviously, those little ages, we don't talk about sex trafficking or human
Yeah.
trafficking. We're talking about social media safety, consent, and empathy, and things like that. But it is definitely something that we love to do. So they in turn love it as well. And so our response is great. Also with educators, our response is great. um, with parents. They are our lowest attended presentation, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But when parents do hear it, they're like, okay, we need to get them into schools. And so that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. That's awesome. I really love the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank
um,
you.
so just if there could be like one takeaway from the information that you shared today that listeners could take with them, like what what would it be for you?
Here's what I would say. I think the biggest takeaway is that human trafficking, this again, this mindset, it's happening to those people over there. And I think what we need to recognize, whether we're parents, grandparents, community members, it is happening right here. Wherever here is, it is happening right here. And it's happening in our homes because of social media. And so that is probably the biggest thing I want people to walk away with, is that mindset that yes, it's right in my backyard. It's right in front of me every day. And I think that is the biggest thing, which is why that education piece is so important.
Yeah, for sure. Um, is there any resources that people or that you have for people to take
Yes,
away with
that's
them?
great. We are a huge resource.
Mhm.
So I would recommend going to setmefreeproject.net. Um, excuse me. We've got a research page on our website. And actually, we're updating that right now. So that will be ready to go very soon. We are adding to our resource page right now. So we have those available. There's a lot of great on that page. There's a lot of great social media um, organizations, things that really show this is, what kind of app this is, what kind of app that is. A lot of great resources for parents, and those are all on our website. So definitely check that out. We'll have that. I should say those are almost all on our website. We'll have those up and running by, I would like to say by the end of next week. Here is what I will say though. We love to be a resource. And so if you have any questions, please reach out at setmefreeproject.net or email me at Stephanie, STEPHANIE at setmefreeproject.net. And I will make sure that you get those resources to you. And we would love to partner with anybody who wants this curriculum in their community, in their schools. That's what we're here for. And again, we love to do webinars. So we will educate anyone who wants to be educated.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining me today.
Thank
And
you.
this was just a very like bite-sized,
Yes.
right?
Right,
Bite-sized little
exactly.
mini educational episode. And I really learned a
Yes.
lot too myself.
Right.
Because like we spoke in the beginning, like, it's easy to just think of like what you see in the movies, like kidnapping, things like that, that there's just
Right.
like so much more. And so thank you for joining me today
Thank
on my
you for having
podcast.
me. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.